Good morning. It is 7:57 a.m. on Sunday, November 15th, 2015. I'm Christiana Ellis. This is 5 more minutes. So, I wasn't up quite as late last night playing Fallout 4. I was still playing Fallout 4 last night. I just made the decision to go to bed earlier than on Friday night. So didn't need to sleep in quite as much. But I didn't only play Fallout 4 yesterday. I did some other things, including grocery shopping and taking Luna to the dog park and watching, catching up on Doctor Who. I haven't watched last night's episode, but I had now seen the two-parter. That was a really good episode. I liked that one quite a lot. That might be my favorite of the Capaldi era so far. Although I guess, like the ones with Maisie Williams too. Anyway, the last thing though that I'm going to talk about more today is Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones. So, as I mentioned a little over a week ago, I decided that I'm going to rewatch all the Star Wars movies in preparation for the new one. And you may recall from my review of The Phantom Menace that I'm a little bit of a prequel apologist. You know, I'm not one of these people who is determined to call the whole film, all three films, just garbage from start to finish. I don't think that's true. And I think that that is an overstatement and unfair to say that. So Attack of the Clones. The problem with this movie, almost more even than the first one, is that I like almost everything about it. But the parts that I don't like just fall so flat. It's like it drags the whole movie to a halt every time we spend time on Padme and Anakin's romance. And I guess the only other thing that really bugs me is all the puns with R2-D2 and C-3PO in that final battle, and all that slapstick with, oh no, 3PO's head got put on a droid soldier's body. Okay, like that stuff is really tiresome. And then the romance plot, obviously, is what everybody gives the hardest time in this movie, and fairly, because it's just weird. It's really plays as creepy, but feels like it's not supposed to, and yet maybe it is. But I mean, like, what do you do in an exchange where she says, "Stop looking at me like that. It makes me uncomfortable." And then she walks away, and he follows her glance with like a creepy leer, like, "Oh, well, I'm not gonna stop." What? Like, it's not remotely romantic. Now, I was saying on a blog post the other day that I think that there's a couple of elements of headcanon that you can lay onto all of this that makes it feel a little bit better, but it's also not appropriate, I don't think, to give the movie credit for these things because they're not on the screen. You have to just kind of fill in the bits and pieces with it. So one is the idea that Anakin is so powerful in the Force that without meaning to, he is essentially doing Jedi mind trick on her to make her love him back. Now, we hear many times throughout the series, oh, Jedi mind tricks can only work on the weak-minded. But what we're talking about in those cases is where you are waving your hand and making someone do something completely different than what they want to do. You know, these are not the droids you're looking for. Well, they actually really are. They are exactly the droids he's looking for, and he could potentially get in real trouble, you know, because he missed them. So, like, that is a mind trick to make him do something very far removed from what he would otherwise do. The idea that someone could be using, you know, like mental pressure to make you love them back, it doesn't have to be that dramatic, and it doesn't have to mean that Padme is weak-minded in order to, you know, in order to be susceptible to it. And I think it's also reasonable to believe that Anakin isn't doing that on purpose. And it also could tie into why is it that the Jedi are so determined to not have people feel possessive or get romantic entanglements, is because there's an element of the dark side pressure that, you know, you're making your desires above whatever the greater purpose is, and it could be like dark side powers. And so there's that element, and then also the element that, and some of this is actually on screen, but it's kind of just details are just dropped in there casually and then sort of left not really emphasized properly. But Padme does have these elements of, she's got all of these responsibilities. She's the hero of the people. She's a senator. But like she talks about how, like, when she was done being queen, she was relieved. But then the queen asked her to be the senator. And so, like, the idea that there are these responsibilities that are kind of a burden, and she's not sure she wants them, but just feels like she's obligated, that produces in her this kind of subconscious self-destructive desire to sabotage that, or even just to be able to fantasize about what would happen if she did, or imagine that she doesn't have those responsibilities. And then Anakin is essentially, that's like, he represents that. The idea of what would it mean for her to be able to choose something for herself instead of always having to think about what's the best for the other people. And I think that her attraction to Anakin, to the extent that it's there at all, is largely because he kind of represents this idea, because of course he's doing the same thing. You know, he's a Jedi. He's not supposed to be in a romantic relationship either. And so that's, I think, why she's kind of so hot and cold, and it's why she would agree to a secret relationship eventually, even though she points out, as she points out in the movie, that seems like a terrible idea. But I think that she is ultimately willing to do that because there's an element of shame in the whole relationship for her. But you know, and at the same time, so like the movie doesn't give us that. You know, you have to layer it on there. But I feel like watching it with that in mind helps make it play better for me. But the other thing that occurred to me watching this movie was, what would it feel like? How would it feel different if I was watching this from the perspective of a kid who'd never seen the original trilogy and in fact didn't even know what was going to happen? And like, what if Anakin was like my guy? He was the hero. Like, I was, you know, I saw him as a little kid in episode 1, and it's like, yeah, it's a little kid. I'm a little kid, and it's exciting. The little kid gets to be involved, and everyone thinks he's important and all of that stuff. And now he's the hero. Oh man, I hope he gets the girl. That sort of thing. Like, I'm sure there are people who kind of felt that way about Anakin. And, you know, whereas I'm coming from the position of, like, I know what's going to happen to him, and so I'm just kind of constantly standing over there by where he's going to be, saying, when are you getting over here? I'm waiting. Instead of kind of hoping that he won't. You know what I mean? How would this movie feel differently to someone who is hoping that Anakin doesn't fall to the dark side? I feel like that would be different. And not unreasonable to remember that there might be people who feel that way because they never, they don't have the attachment to the original trilogy that I do. Like, these were their Star Wars movies from when they were a kid. So, that said, there are also lots of things I think that are really great in the movie. Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan is great. Christopher Lee as Count Dooku is great. I think Count Dooku, there's this scene where he's captured Obi-Wan and he goes to kind of interrogate him, but he's basically telling the truth from an appearance of untrustworthiness in order to throw him off, Obi-Wan, off the real trail. He basically lays it out for him exactly. The Senate is actually under control of a Sith Lord. We're trying to stop him. Well, I guess he doesn't really say we're trying to stop him. That part wouldn't be true because he's really working with him. But the point is that he, knowing that Obi-Wan won't believe a word he says, tells him the exact truth in order to provoke a defensive response of, well, I know that's not true. He must just be trying to turn us against each other, when in fact we know it is exactly true. So I think Christopher Lee's just a great presence in anything he's in. There's a lot of exciting action stuff. I mean, it's, you can say that it's over reliant on CG and it loses some of that practical sense to it, and I think that's true. But it's still a lot of exciting stuff going on regardless. And some of the banter between Obi-Wan and Anakin, like during that fight on Coruscant at the beginning, I think there's a lot to like in the movie. And it's just even more dramatically pronounced than in the first one. There's good stuff, but then it just like, oh, Padme, I hate sand. Because there was so much sand when I was a kid, and now there's not sand, and I like you because you're not like sand. Okay. But everybody knows the bad stuff. I just wanted to emphasize that I think that there's good stuff too, and that it's intellectually dishonest to pretend like the whole movie is trash, because it's not. It's just painfully uneven. Alright, so that is it for Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Talk to you guys tomorrow for 5 more minutes.